Hello, my friends. This week we're going to talk about the integrative process. So we'll start out by talking about design and construction processes in general and compare and contrast the traditional versus the integrated process. We'll touch on the idea of iteration and feedback loops. And in your next video, we'll cover the project team involved in this design process and also design charrettes. Let's get started. The traditional design and construction process, from an architect's point of view, is divided into a series of phases, right? And these are defined by the AIA, the American Institute of Architects. But here's a graphic to help you walk you through it. So here's a chart showing this traditional design process, kind of an overall idea of what we're doing when and who is involved. Let's take a look at this. So right here we have the design phases. In these beginning phases, you are, as a designer, determining what is going to be built. And then starting with the construction document phase, you're determining how it will be built. With the permitting and the bidding phase, you are determining who will build it. And finally, the design will be realized in this construction phase. So who is involved in the traditional design process? Well, way back here in the pre-design phase, of course, the owner is involved, your client, and the designer. This is usually the architect. Okay. Starting with some of the early design phase, consultants are brought on board, and this could be engineers, interior designers, many different types of consultants. They could be brought on board as early as schematic design, depending on their specialty, but often they are not brought on board until later in the design process. All right. By the time you are in the construction document phase, all your consultants are on board. All right. And then when we move into the permitting and building and process, the agency, that's the city or the county, it's the authority who has jurisdiction over your project, will be brought onto the team. All right. And also all of your builders and trades people. All right. They're going to join the team through the construction project. So that's an overview of the traditional process. Let's move to the integrative process. What is it? Integrated design is a method that emphasizes collaboration of all the involved parties, all the different stakeholders, designers, owners, consultants, contractors, etc. All right, very early in the process, and this will promote a whole building approach. So let's take a look at a project timeline for an integrative process. This is the same kind of chart we just looked at, but it's for the integrated design process instead of the traditional. So you'll see that we still have similar project phases: conceptualization, criteria design, detailed design. You can call these different names, all right? But we're still moving from beginning to the end of the design phases. Now take a look at the design decisions and you'll see that they are moved up earlier in the process. So we determine what is going to be built, who is going to build it, that is moved way up in the process, how it's going to be built, again, very early in the process. Taking a look down here, who are the players involved? Let's look at the team. You can see that, again, we start the project with the owners and the designer, right? But very, excuse me, very early in the process, we bring in all of the other team members. You can bring in the agency with some pre-design meetings. You bring in the consultants very early in the process. And this is important, you have the contractor as part of your team early in the process. Let's compare these two processes. On the left, we have the integrated design process, which is inclusive from the outset, from the beginning of the project. And on the right, we have the conventional, or we've been calling it the traditional design process, which involves each team member only when they're essential, right? Bringing them in a little bit later. Integrated design process is front loaded. Conventional design process has less energy and collaboration in those early stages. And this is important. The integrated design process is an iterative process, and the conventional design process is a linear process. What does that mean? Let's take a look. Iteration, if you haven't heard this word before, it means the act of repeating something or a repetition, right? The process of doing something again and again, and usually trying to improve it, all right? So an iterative process, and now we're talking about the design process when we're trying to design a building, contains numerous feedback loops. So you get to revisit your design decisions, see if they still make sense, and change and improve them if they don't. This iterative process, difficult thing to say, is circular. It's repetitive, and it provides opportunities within the process for setting your green design goals and then checking your project, your design decisions against those goals. And so this is the way that project teams apply systems thinking to the integrative process. Let's take another look at this. The linear design process, this is associated with the traditional process, involves handoffs between the different teams when tasks are completed. All right, so the architect might complete a floor plan, hand it off to the structural engineer who will then design their system. All right, this process makes it more difficult to use systems thinking. The iterative process, on the other hand, involves continual development of ideas. There are collaborations of small groups, and then the decisions are brought back to the team for evaluation. The process is cyclical and involves feedback loops, and therefore there are more opportunities to find those synergies that can really boost your building's performance. All right, to close out this topic, let's take one more look at a project timeline. This is from a different source, so the graphic's a little bit different. But we still start up here with the project phases: pre-design, schematic design, design development, construction documents. All right, this is the construction phase, and here is occupancy and then post-occupancy. So in this diagram is trying to show you that within each phase, all right, we start with and these darker blue ovals are supposed to mean a coordination meeting. Okay, we start with team coordination, and then there is a cyclical design process where each different team member, all right, does their own design thing and maybe comes back and revisits this section, and then they meet again to coordinate and collaborate. And this happens again, all right, in each phase. And it happens again, and they might revisit. Sometimes you might go back and revisit these decisions. And you can say that the diagram is trying to show you that the different designs, the different disciplines are getting closer and closer in coordination. All right, you can see that the cyclical aspect continues here. Construction's a little bit different. We try to do a more linear process in construction, all right, because of how that physically works. All right, so that's what the feedback loops and iteration looks like in an iterative design process. Thanks, everyone. In this video, we just compared and contrasted the traditional design process versus the iterative design process.